And we're live. Hi, everybody. This is my friend Wade, and I'm going to let him introduce himself really quickly to all of you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Wade Bradford. I am an author. I write books for children. So I write picture books, I write middle grade novels, and I write a lot of plays, most of which are performed for community theater and high school theater. And what else do I write? Those are the main things that I write. I've dabbled in writing screenplays, but I haven't had any success with that. But I've had success in the children's book world and playwriting world. So those are my main avenues. But I will sometimes dabble in short fiction for contemporary adult readers, things like that.
I didn't know you did that. I knew that you were considering what was it, young adult or middle grade? What was it you were considering writing right
Well,
now?
I've been writing middle grade, and when I first got into writing for children or 18 and under, I thought that I was writing young adult, and so I was working on a novel. And while I was working on it, because I did not know the market very well, and so I thought, like, oh yeah, this is young adult. I'm writing a young adult novel. And then when I went to my first writers conference and I was showing people, it's like, yeah, here's my young adult novel, and they were looking at it, and I was telling them about it, and they were saying, oh, that's middle grade. Yeah. Basically, it was like, oh, the characters are around like 12 and 13 years old, and the most that they do is like maybe they hold hands and feel shy around the person that's their crush. They don't use any profanity, and happy things happen by the end of the adventure. Whereas, of course, I learned very quickly that young adult can be very gritty, and it is much more about being on the cusp of adulthood. So you're 16, 17, 18, things like that. So some of my plays kind of fit into that young adult category, but I haven't written a novel yet that's in the young adult category. I'm intrigued by it, but I think as I get older, I get less and less mature. And as my increases, I'm writing for younger and younger audiences. So maybe in 10 years, I'll just do like a board book for a 2-year-old child.
I think you and I are opposites that way. The older I get, the grittier my work gets, which is really kind of an interesting phenomenon. I like all of it. I read all of it. I dabble in writing all of it. But my start mainly was in poetry, and I write a lot of flash fiction, and I am writing my second novel, which I want to be my debut. So I shelved my first novel, which was extremely painful. Hello, William Case. Thank you for joining us, friend. Anyway, so I shelved that 3/4 of the way done, and then started again with a blank slate on a new one, because I just could feel in my bones that this needed to be my debut. So anyway, so Wade's links are below for you. You can check out his wonderful books and the different things that he's doing, and check out his YouTube channel. He's got a lot of fun shorts that I've been enjoying. They're all kinds of
into TikTok, and I blame quarantine on.
I'm really enjoying your Chipotle burrito. I think I've seen it like 4 times.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
And your Bridgerton. That one's funny to me too. So yeah, so check out Wade's channel. Like I said, the links are below for you guys. And today's topic, hello, Dal. I love you. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Dal.
So Wade here is a creative writing professor, and I invited him to talk to us today because I made a video that was controversial. I was expecting it to be not controversial. I was expecting it to be a clicky title, obviously, which has like a little touch of controversy in it, but not like, I don't think my channel's ever gotten so many dislikes in the history of my channel. And I got personal DMs, and I legit lost friendships over a 1-minute video because it was a YouTube short. And I was like, Okay, I'm going to revisit this one.
Is it still up? Because I haven't seen this video. Now I want to watch it.
The title is Show Don't Tell is a Lie.
I
And
see.
yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, you're already laughing at me. I can feel how fun.
No, I can just imagine some, because there's so many writers who are like, that's the mantra that they live by. So it's like, why, you know? But I bet you got a lot of views.
I got a few angry views. Yes, I got a few angry comments, but I also got a lot of feedback of people that were concerned that it wasn't 100% accurate. And I was like, whoa, okay, my channel is not about being inaccurate. You know, I'm not one of those channels that's up for vanity clicks. I am here for my viewers. The whole reason I have this channel is I want to collect and create the most effective writing advice for people, so that they don't have to go and hunt it down all over YouTube and they can find it. For example, I just created a playlist on thrillers. I have a video from Brandon Sanderson. I have a video from a few playwriters, different things that all together coalesce to become like, this is the best advice I can find on writing thrillers, you know? So that's kind of the goal of this channel. And so I absolutely never want anything that's inaccurate or whatever. So I want to revisit Show versus Tell. So the other reason I wanted to do it, thank you, Dal. She says, if you lost friends so easily, they were not friends. Thank you. I side with you on this one. And William says he's looking forward to this video, that he struggles with Show versus Tell. I think that this is a common struggle. And I think that the saying, the reason I made the title that I did is I think that the saying "show don't tell" is an overcorrection. I think that newer writers, they tell too much. They don't exactly know how to show, and there's conflicting information online. And so I think that they're like, you need to go away from it. You need to go, just don't do it. And I think it just sort of turned into this snowball of, yeah, we never do it, never, never, never. But, you know, as I'm sitting here, I'm holding this brand new fantastic book by Paolini, and he tells on the second page of this book. But he does it intentionally. So he doesn't just tell something because he tells something. And we'll get into, you know, definitions and stuff later. But the thing that I found it interesting is I kind of think of it like volleyball, and excuse me if I'm using my terms incorrectly here, but when you really want to get a quick point, you can set the ball and someone else can spike it over the net. Well, in my opinion, what he did right there in that book is he set it with the telling, and then he spiked it with the showing. So he said, you know, this is their relationship. This is the year that they've had. This is how it's progressed. And then he immediately jumps to them seeing each other and having those thoughts and thinking about those concerns that they have and about their relationship. So it was immediately jumping into the showing, and it really set that up because you were expecting sort of that interaction. And when you got it, it almost made it more rich in my mind personally. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from, where I'm thinking, you know, there are times when you should just say that something happened. You should just cut to whatever's next. You should just whatever, and you should cut out the telling. And so now correct me if I'm wrong. This is my next analogy. I like to mix analogies because I'm kind of like that. But
mixed metaphors, great. That's good. Keep going.
So thank you. Appreciate the support. Anyway, so when an escalator moves forward, you can either let it take you forward or you can walk backwards. But when you're walking backwards on an escalator that's moving, you're not really going backwards or forwards. You're sort of stalled. And I feel like every single thing that you put in the book should be moving the story forward. I mean, your word count is always moving. No matter what you're doing, the word count's always moving, but your story might be stuck. And so I think that's when you don't show, is when it stalls, when you have to sort of go backwards to just give all this information, or whatever, when it creates that effect and the reader isn't progressing with your word count. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I know what you're saying about the perils of show. At least I think maybe the way you're defining it could mean that there's too much description, there's too much visualization of what's happening in the story, and maybe too much inner monologue, and nothing's happening.
Or too much backstory because you want to tell that, or too much, like you lose focus of what that scene is about or what that chapter is about.
Yeah.
Essentially.
So I guess one thing. So first of all, going back to your controversial title, I'm a sucker for those kind of titles, and when people, they just know that people want to click on those titles, but they also want to get angry about it, right? When you challenge something. I can't remember. I know I've done some clickbait kind of titles, but I can't remember offhand what I've done. But I think that an important thing to think about, though, is that we hear that phrase, show, don't tell. We hear that phrase a lot, and we might argue. Have you ever gotten to an argument with someone and you realize, oh, we're not really arguing. We just have a different viewpoint on what is what. So it's probably important to define our terms, because when we talk about showing versus telling, those two verbs can mean a lot of different things, and so a lot of times people equate the word tell with like summarize, or to vaguely summarize, and they equate the word show with give the reader a vicarious experience.
Yes.
So those are two ways that I often think of when I think of tell versus show. Show versus tell, whatever. I think that's how I think of it. But other people, that might disagree with me, that's fine. They might be defining their terms differently, and that's good to know. I do see a lot of comments whenever I'm, exploring this topic. I see comments on YouTube with people saying like, all writing is telling. I'm telling a story, and so they get kind of upset about like that, the idea of show. And if an old like great grandmother came up to you and was like, "Let me tell you a story," you're like, "No, grandma, show me a story," right? So I think one of the problems is that we are storytellers, and so we that word "tell," right? Tell me a story. That's an important ingredient, or at least we kind of think of it, because like that's what I'm doing. I'm telling a story. So for our purposes, for today's purposes, defining our terms of what I'm going to talk about. Let's think of tell as we are delivering. Oh, very good. So when we are telling.
I've got the banner up for anybody that doesn't see that.
There we go. When we are telling in a story, we are delivering information and events in a very brief way. Right. So we're telling, we're going quickly through it. And so we're not very concerned with imagery that much, right? We're not concerned with a lot of specific detail. And maybe we're not even concerned with action, or at least like a sequence of little actions and gestures and moments and things like that. We're kind of summarizing the events. We're recapping the events, or we're briefly telling the reader the events. And so when we talk about whether or not we should do that, we kind of want to think about a few things. We want to think about the reader's experience, and we want to think about the genre and the medium that we're writing for. So if we're telling a fable or an old-fashioned myth, that kind of old-fashioned storytelling, telling is great, right? So if great grandma is telling a story, and she talks about, a talking spider named Anansi, an old folk tale or something like that.
I love that story.
Anansi tales, right? So in the Anansi tales, or almost any fable, like Aesop's fables and things like that, Greek myths, we might get little bits of dialogue. We might get little moments, but the storyteller of a myth might just say that, Apollo was the god of the sun, and he took a chariot across the sky. Some myths it's Helios, but now we're going to get hate mail about Greek mythos. Wade got I know Helios.
My daughter might be in those. She's very passionate about mythology.
Right, yeah. But what I'm saying is that that you can have in a fable or a myth, you might have you might just be telling. You might just be giving the information and letting the reader absorb the information, and hopefully they're delighted by the story. What's interesting about fables and myths, since they're older and in most cases kind of ancient, it's back when storytelling was kind of new amongst civilization. So they could tell stories that way, and people probably gathered around, the campfire and were amazed by those stories, even though they didn't have the elements of fiction that we think of today, right? There's no dramatic irony in there, and there's no imagery and things like that in those very straight to the point fables. But amazing things were happening in them, at least to the readers of the time, and so that's all you needed. So that kind of telling, when we're telling a child's story, we can still use those kind of elements in certain types of stories. But if we're talking about contemporary fiction, if we're talking about novel writing, if we're talking about writing short fiction, maybe not flash fiction, but if we're talking about any kind of well-developed fiction, then we probably want to do more showing. Should we move on to what is showing?
Absolutely, yes. There were a few comments.
Or do we have questions about telling?
There are. Dal has a question about how much is too much, which we can answer in the next section about showing.
Yeah. And
then William is talking about how he gets told that he uses too much description when talking about character and like describing the person or the character. That's interesting. Yeah, I think that, okay, here I'm going to say, I think that trends have changed significantly. I've been reading a lot of classics with my children. My children, by the way, William Case, I have a 12-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 3-year-old. And they are readers. They just, oh my gosh, they could do it all day long. And my daughter started reading at a 5th grade level before kindergarten started. And she started reading it at 8th grade level by the beginning of 2nd grade. This is her Lexile numbers. This is what the school tested her at. So she is well above grade level with reading. And so I really got into censoring a lot because my daughter's Lexile level literally had Hunger Games in it at the beginning of 2nd grade. And there is not a way in this world my daughter was going to get an introduction into the world through Hunger Games. Wasn't going to happen. So, and then once you get to that age, there's a lot of kissy and things. It was not okay for my 2nd grader. And so we went to the classics, which had all of the complex story with none of those added things in it. And so I think some of the things that have changed over time, and correct me if you disagree, are the level of content has obviously changed, but reading Roald Dahl and writers like this, there was a lot more telling happening in those books than I find personally in the books that I've picked up today. I find a lot more showing. I mean, we were reading, what is it? We have The Finger, and we have a few other ones that were newer to me with Roald Dahl's. And this person went here and they said this thing. And to me, that's all telling. And so it was just very interesting analyzing that while I was reading it to my children, realizing that there was quite a bit of telling, more so than I feel like you would find today. So the other thing that I thought has changed, so I feel like content has changed. I feel like there's a lot more showing. And then, oh yeah, it was William's comment that led me into that little tangent. I feel like character descriptions have changed as well. I feel like before it's almost turned into like a trope in its own, because before it was, as soon as the character came into the scene, you would say their eyes were this, their hair was this, blah, 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 blah. And it's almost become taboo now to do that because everybody has starlight eyes and chestnut hair and whatever. And so I think the advice now, you could probably speak to this more, but I think the advice now is to to sprinkle it throughout based on what people are noticing about that person. Is that kind of what you see as the advice for that?
Well, again, it really depends on things, like the genre and stuff like that. Going back to the physical descriptions of people, it does seem like people like writers are more likely to kind of hold back and, like you say, sprinkle it through. Whereas I think in older novels, you see them like the character walks in and like, let's start with the hair and work our way down describing it. But here's the thing is that I don't know, and again, it depends on how you define your terms. If we're just talking about, because I think one of your viewers had the sort of the question or the comment about like, yeah, some people say that I'm telling too much or I'm being overly descriptive, and I don't know.
To be clear, he writes romance, where description is more.
If we're reading something and we feel like it's boring and tedious and there's something wrong with it, it might not just be show versus tell, right? That if we're over describing something, that's, descriptive writing is sometimes, I think, different than what we're talking about here as far as showing or telling. So you can, you can have a page of description and it could be a blending of these two things. So if we think of showing as giving the reader a vicarious experience, right? Think of showing as any detail that is going to make us feel what the characters are going through. That can be showing. And also, when I say vicarious experience, that means that the reader is actively engaged in doing some of the work. There's a good video about this. There's a TED Talk by Andrew Stanton from Pixar, who talks a lot about show and versus tell in a very cinematic way. And I think that goes back to what you were saying about the change. I think one of the reasons why novels have changed over the last 100 years, or maybe just the last 50 years, is that many writers, and I do this myself sometimes, we think cinematically oftentimes instead of thinking in a literary sense.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Right. So a lot of times I'm writing my novel, but I'm also thinking like, when Steven Spielberg adapts this novel into a movie, this is going to be a real scene, right? So we have, many of us, not all of us, but we have very sort of cinematic minds because we've been raised on TV and movies, and so I think many of us are writing that, and more often than not, it's the people who've like said, you know what, I don't like watching TV and movies. I love reading a book, and I'm going to get into just reading literature. And then when they write something, it's going to be probably much more literary, probably much more innovative, and sadly, probably much more likely to be rejected by a lot of people. It's like, that's not marketable enough. So there's a lot of different ways to show. But the video that the Andrew Stanton, the TED Talk that I mentioned, in that he is basically saying that the audience wants to work for their meal. The audience, your reader, they don't want to be spoon-fed the information, the events of the story and the reactions of the characters. They actually want to do some of the work. Andrew Stanton argues that they don't know that they want it, and they wouldn't say that they want to do work, but they want to do it. And he calls it basically give them 2 + 2. Don't give the audience 4, give them 2 + 2, and they will do part of the work. And my favorite example that comes to mind when I think of this, and we should probably move on to the what is showing banner.
Really quickly, I just want to address Dal's comments. She said, Dal, sweetheart, are you're legally blind, correct? You can correct me here. She said that these aren't really, they don't feel like they're hitting home for her, if I'm reading her correctly. All these movie examples, I don't watch movies. I don't think cinematically. And I think that's part of the reason, Dal, that you write a little more towards the literary fiction, and that's totally okay. But I think that Wade's statements still apply to what you're doing. So if I could be a little Silence of the Lambs for a second, it's anything that lets the reader slip into the skin of the character. So, and this is where I got in trouble with my examples, but correct me if I'm wrong. It's where they're moving where the character's moving. They're grabbing what the character's grabbing. They're seeing what the character's seeing. They're tasting what the character's tasting. Yeah.
I think, yeah, when we think of showing, again, because it's this vicarious experience. So I know from her YouTube videos that Dal often writes protagonists that are blind. And she is blind as well. So I'm guessing, I'd love to read some of her stories, by the way. I've listened to some of them, I think, on her YouTube channel. But so if the word cinematic doesn't sort of work if we're talking about like non-visual imagery, when we say imagery, of course, we're talking about any of the senses and not just the sight. So if I am a reader having a vicarious experience while I'm reading a story about a blind protagonist in a science fiction world, I'm going to get the sense of, oh, well, this is what it is like to not be able to see, to rely on other senses in this way, and so I'm going to get into the mindset. And obviously, if we're writing first person, then that happens sometimes more naturally. But even in third person, limited or omniscient, we should be still sprinkling in those specific details to give us the experience. And I'll give Dal and anybody else that wants to talk about not movies but literature. A classic example comes from Kate Chopin, and I'm going to spoil the end of the story if you haven't read it yet. I'm going to tell you it. I can't show it to you because that would take a while to read. So in The Story of an Hour, it's about a young woman named Mrs. Mallard, and we are told, right, this is telling, the narrator tells us at the beginning that she has a heart condition, right? So we're given information in a very exposition sort of way. It's like, she's young, she's got a heart condition.
Yeah.
And then we start getting into the showing, because what happens is dialogue starts to happen, and action and specific details start to happen. And as the story unfolds, Louise Mallard's sister is there at the house, and this takes place in 1800s America. So her sister's there at the house, the family friend is there, Richards is there, and they're basically saying, your husband, Brentley Mallard, has been killed. There was a train accident. A lot of people died. I'm sorry. And we want to tell you this very, very carefully because we know you've got a heart condition. And so then the rest of the narrative, she goes to her room, she's crying, she's weeping, she's grieving, but then her sobs kind of linger a little bit, and she starts to look out at the sunshine out the window, and she starts to kind of get scared because this strange feeling is happening upon her. She's resisting this feeling, and then the feeling grabs her, and she feels free, that she is free of her husband, even though she kind of loved him. But, she doesn't have to be responsible to him. She doesn't have to be obligated to him. And so she feels like a goddess of victory. And she feels, this exalted is what she's feeling. And so all of this is described much better than I'm describing it. And then she kind of calms herself, composes herself. Her sister's at her bedroom door saying, Louise, what's wrong? You're making yourself ill. What's happening, Louise? She's like, go away. I'm not ill. And so she kind of drinks in this newfound feeling of freedom. And she says a little prayer that her life is going to be long, because it was only yesterday that she wished that life would not be long. And so she goes out to her sister, and they're walking down the stairs, and she's walking like a goddess of victory, according to the narration. And then, as she's walking down the stairs with her sister, Brentley Mallard, her husband, walks in through the door. And he's got his travel sack, and he's got his umbrella, and he just decided to walk home from work. He was not at the train in the accident. He had no idea that there was an accident. And he just comes like walking in. And as soon as he walks in, Richards, the family friend, tries to, get in front of Louise Mallard to shield her. But it's too late. Now, the last lines are when the doctors came,
Oh, no.
they said she died of heart disease, of the joy that kills. So when the doctors came, they said she died of heart disease, of the joy that kills. So there's this missing piece. So we can kind of think of, and I'm borrowing ideas from other videos I've seen. I didn't come up with these theories myself, right? But there's this missing piece. And so one way of looking at artfully showing us instead of telling us is to figure out the right missing pieces to have in your story, the right little gaps. So when I teach this story to students, when they read this, it goes through all those things. It's a lot of telling. A lot of telling is happening in that story. But when it gets to the part where Brintley Mallard comes in, the narrator does not say her heart stopped working because of sudden extreme despair at seeing her husband, and she died and fell down the stairs feeling, so disastrous about the turn of events, right? There's no narration that says that she dies and she falls down the stairs and she was bitter and suddenly disappointed. And there's also this irony, right? There's this dramatic irony that's there because the doctors don't tell, right? The doctors basically say, "Oh, she died of the joy that kills," meaning that the doctors think that she was so overjoyed at seeing her husband. They were thinking like, "Oh yes, of course, this young, dutiful wife who sees her husband arriving at home, she must have been so like, oh, I'm so happy. Oh, I can't take it," right? Like, "Oh, my heart is filled with joy. I can't take it. Goodbye, my love," right? And that's not what happens. But there's nothing overtly stated in the text that says that. So we as readers, we need to put two and two together. Now, the tricky part of that is that some readers might not get that, right? So we have to write well enough. And sometimes we tell details, sometimes we show details, but we have to find this right combination so that readers can put two and two together and come up with their own conclusions, and hopefully the conclusions that they want. Sometimes my students, when they read the story for the first time, they're like, "What happened? I don't get it." And that's probably because they're used to stories that tell them everything. If you want examples of telling, go to any Wikipedia movie synopsis. And that will walk you through the entire movie or book, right? If you want to go back to book example, right? So book, short story, play, go to see a play synopsis. The synopsis will give you all three acts of the play in paragraph form, and will give you none of the magic that happens from showing.
Absolutely. And I think this is a great answer to Dal's question about when is it too much? We had a comment here. I need to scroll back up. Paula said, "I once read the advice, you show emotions and tell actions."
Well, again, it goes back to, what do we mean by show versus tell? Because a lot of I like the idea of the show emotions, right? So if there's if we say, I've been reading a lot of my students' stories for my creative writing class, and a lot of them are hoping to be sort of very dramatic, and so they will write stories like, "Oh, my father was killed by a tiger. I was very sad when he died." Did I show you that, or did I tell you that?
Oh, you definitely told it.
Yeah, so that's telling, because as a reader, when I read that, it's like, I know the character's sad, but I don't feel sad. I don't feel sad. And even when we're talking about just like writing, essays for my students, I have them write narrative essays about somebody that they admire. And so I will often have students that will, I had one student years ago, he wrote paragraphs after paragraph, and I never got to, he was writing about his dad. And the paragraphs went like this: "Oh, my dad's a very kind person. He's always there for me. He's a stand-up guy. I'm so glad I have him in my life." And I learned nothing. I experienced. I may have learned how the student felt, maybe, but I experienced nothing. So if we're going back to fairy tales, if a storyteller says, "Oh, Cinderella was raised by a wicked stepmother," as a contemporary reader, I don't trust that. It's like, why is she wicked? What did she do? I need details. I need details. So that's why, going back to the emotions versus actions, some action. If we're talking about verbs, verbs are it's very good to choose strong verbs. So instead of just relying on verbs like is and was, they're kind of like equal signs. Give us verbs like, slapped, itched, pressed, argued. Like, give us those kind of verbs.
Juicy words.
Yes, yeah.
That's what my children's teachers call them. Juicy words.
Because the verbs very often carry this emotional connotation. So that's how you can kind of merge emotion and action together.
William just said he's pretty sure Cinderella was his sister because he had a wicked stepmother. Well, you better write a story about it, William. So let's get in then to showing. And I think for me, I felt like I had a good handle on this. I felt like I knew what it was. I felt like I knew what I was doing. And I created some examples for that video I mentioned. And I had an editor be like, yeah, those aren't really good examples. Oh, my bad. Okay, so let's just define for a second what showing is. To me, showing is just getting in the body. So instead of just being like, he picked it up and left, you would actually show that his hand is clenching it and his legs are walking and things like that are more immersive in the scene. Is that not quite far enough?
Well, I guess the example, it's hard when we're not seeing.
Yeah.
You know what? Stephen King. Have you read Stephen King's On Writing?
I have seen your video on it.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. So Stephen King sort of goes into that a little bit. I think it's actually on page 184, and I wish I had brought it and I could just read it. So I'll have to summarize. But I think it's on page 184. Stephen King's talking about his character Annie Wilkinson from Misery. And so Stephen King basically says, Annie Wilkinson is this, demented psychopathic nurse. But if I have to tell you that, then I lose. If I can show it to you, I win. And so how does he show it to us? All of the choices that the character Annie Wilkinson makes, those are all part of the showing process. So when you're talking about sort of the clenched fist holding the phone, the clenched, the clenching of the phone. Like, I've got an old-fashioned phone now, by the way, right? Like I should be clenching should be doing this, clenching the phone. Hello.
The way you hold the old ones.
So to some regard, those kind of verbs and those kind of details are going to reveal, so
they reveal the character.
Yeah, like as a writer, hopefully your audience likes to people watch now and then, right? And so if you've watched people's body language, if you've watched people's body language, then you know that can show, or that can reveal. In fact, reveal is kind of a good word. I think when we're talking about balancing, and that's why I use the example of Kate Chopin's short story, because that ending is showing something, it's revealing something. So again, showing the way I'm thinking of it, this vicarious experience, it's sometimes it's like, I want a vivid description of something and vivid details of something and physical action and things like that, and body language. Sometimes showing is part of those things, but sometimes it's whatever sort of magic is happening in the story, so that you can reveal it, so that your reader has this aha moment, and they feel like they are a part of the story, in the story, that they're turning those pages. And for me, it is about, what decisions are the characters making, what reactions are the characters making, and what kind of reactions. So if we think of
showing is less than, if I understand you correctly, it's less of the actual action and more of what the action reveals about the character's internal world.
Yes.
What you're saying.
So if we have, because like I said, sometimes I write plays, and sometimes I get bogged down. I don't do this too much anymore, but it used to be a big deal for me about where's the character. It's like the character opens the door and the character shuts the door, the character moves over here and things like that. And so sometimes my playwright brain, because to some degree it's important, like, because technically it might like, where's the character at what part? Yes. And so when I'm revising
similar backgrounds, so I'm like, preach.
Maybe you do this when I'm revising my novels, when I'm writing fiction and I'm revising my fiction, I will catch myself, and I have to work really hard to edit this out. I will describe the character, like holding. It's like he had this he had a journal in his left hand. The pencil was in his right hand. It's like, why is that important? It doesn't. I suppose it's like, it means he's right-handed, but if it's not important to the story, so I will spend like too much time talking about like where, how are they holding all three of the objects, or things like that, because I'm thinking like a playwright. There's going to be an actor on stage, and so when you're thinking like a novelist, it's more, I think, about planting enough of the right seeds. So that showing, that revealing, that vicarious experience, that the reader's going to do part. The reader's going to do part of the work. And when we talk about the opposite of showing, which is telling and something we call exposition, right? A lot of times when there's too much exposition, we as a reader, we groan like, characters wouldn't explain all of this. Right. So if we have characters say like, Bob, it's good to see you, because yesterday I remember that you felt sick, and I heard from your wife that you got bad news from the doctor, and that the doctor said, right. Like if there's a character that's unveiling way too much information, that's not good.
Okay, so an example of showing in that situation that you gave would be that the character rushed up to their friend and, like pampered them. Are you okay? I'm so glad you're here. I was worried about you. That's sort of the dialogue. And then the action of rushing to them would show.
I think so, right? So the way you're describing it, and you used a good verb, pampering, right? Pampering, again, there's context, there's emotional context, right? So pampering is different than pestering, right? Like they can both be annoying, but pampering at least shows that there's this indication of love and concern, and maybe spoiling or babying, somebody. So choosing those words can help conjure up different images with that. Let me ask you a different question, Kammi. How do you feel about spiders?
Oh yeah, spiders and I are not friends. We are not friends.
So let's imagine that you wrote that we were starting a story. And we said, this is a good example of how we can, I think, hopefully, I don't know what your comments are saying. People are like, they say like, this guy doesn't know anything. Actually, the anger and hostility will now be on me instead of on you. Okay, so let's imagine that we are writing a story, and the first line is, spiders and I are not friends, right? Spiders and I are not friends, right? First person, spiders and I are not friends. Now that to me is an example, and not a bad thing, because telling doesn't have to be bad. So that's an example of telling, right? That first sentence just announced. That's like saying like, my name's Cinderella, I got a wicked stepmother, right? So spiders and I are not friends. So that's one line of telling. Now, what should hopefully follow is a paragraph or more, maybe a whole page or a whole story, a paragraph of showing, paragraph of giving us this example, telling us, showing us, I guess, but giving the reader this vicarious experience, so that we are able to not just read that first line and just kind of say like, okay, Kammi doesn't like spiders. They're not friends. It's like to what length, right? So that's
embarrassing lengths.
That's where showing comes in.
Nobody film me.
So if you had a character maybe similar to yourself, what would you do to show us that she and spiders are not friends?
All right, I'm gonna embarrass myself, you guys. There would be a little bit of jumping and a lot of squealing. Okay, a little bit of squealing. Don't out me on camera, Wade. Some squealing, some jumping, definitely some running away, and my dog looking at me like I've lost my ever-loving mind. Well, she goes over and sniffs it and then walks away. You're crazy, woman. Yeah, a little bit of that. Spiders and I are not friends.
That's great. I like the detail about the dog as the supporting character in there. Right, so that's
you're welcome. I'm forever telling stories.
So that's I think and we're just verbalizing out loud. But those kind of details, right? We are starting with general stuff because it was talking about it as if it's multiple different experiences, saying like, oh, I squeal and I jump and I shout and stuff like that. But once you got to talking about your dog, that's like now we're showing, right? And the sniff, right? The action of sniff and then leaving it away, right? And then sprinkling, right? And again, we're just verbalizing, but we take this idea and sprinkle in more details about the expression on your dog's face. Sprinkle in, a simile or a metaphor, now and then. Like, how does the spider appear? I was thinking about spiders today. That's why I brought it up. And I kind of like spiders. So you could probably tell that I'm not that afraid of spiders because I said, this is what I wrote. A spider bungee jumps from the ceiling, dangling on a web string as if he's auditioning for the next Mission Impossible movie.
I love that.
So that's my character, observing what the spider's doing in a way that's like cool, action oriented, making kind of a silly comparison. To Tom Cruise, basically.
Yes.
And so depending on how we describe things, if we're not just telling the summarized events the way we do in telling, if we are showing the reader whatever variety of imagery and details we want, so that the reader the reader's having a vicarious experience, but also the reader is like, oh, I'm getting into Wade's mindset about this spider. This is what I would do with the spider, by the way. If a spider like just drops here, I wish I had visual effects there. So if the spider drops here, my first reaction is to gasp, kind of, grab onto my chair like I've just received a little bit of an electric shock, not enough for Green Mile and an electrocution, but just a little bit by the surprise. But then something will click in my mind. It's like, you know what? This guy's just a friend. He's just hanging out. He's just being cool. And what I will do is, if I'm skillful, I will pinch the web that he is lowering himself down on before he gets to my desk. And while he is pulling out filament after filament, trying to reach his destination, I will be equally doing a spider web tug of war, pulling the filaments, and I do that balancing act, that little spider circus act, all the way to the front door, where if I can manage it, I will open it up and I will escort him out of the building, and bid him a fond farewell, because I like spiders and I don't want to hurt them, and I'm not telling you that story to say like, look, I'm brave and I'm not afraid of spiders. That story because jumping out of your chair and moving to the corner of the room until your guard dog goes to interact with the spider, or demanding that husband, wife runs in and deals with the problem, or just when the spider comes down, you just look up right, and you just clap your hands together and then wipe off the guts on your shirt, right? Those are all different choices.
Yes.
That's hopefully examples of all showing, because they're action and choice and reaction oriented. Whereas telling is saying Wade is kind of friends with spiders. Kammi's not friends with spiders. This sociopath clapped his hands, hates spiders, right? Right. So just making an announcement of how we feel about something, or how a character feels about something, that's not enough. We can't say, oh, that Billy was embarrassed or Susie was angry.
Yeah.
We got to show these characters in action.
Yes. Yes. So I love this, and William gave a quick example here, and then I want to move on to Q&A before we get into the prompts.
Sure.
I want people to have a chance to ask any last minute questions they have for Wade about showing or telling. And William says, she squealed and stumbled backwards when the spider dropped from the ceiling almost onto her nose, tripping over her own feet and crashing into the coffee table, smashing it into pieces.
Okay. Oh, dear.
She a little bit doesn't like spiders. Little Miss Muppet.
Yes. So that's showing that. Also, it's showing a little bit of the reactionary nature of the character, the clumsiness. Certainly the fear, but kind of the fear combined with the clumsiness of the character. And probably she chose a very cheap coffee table. I'm worried about her choice of coffee tables, because you should be able to fall on a coffee table and have it must be glass. Must be a glass coffee table.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, I've had a glass.
Brittle glass.
I immediately saw glass shattering. So this is then an example of showing based on your examples, correct?
Yeah, I think, mainly because we got to the clumsy aspect.
Mm-hmm.
The other things like the coffee table, just having actions like the coffee table smashes and she squeals and, actually squealing. Again, when we're talking about showing, we're playing sort of psychologist of these characters. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, what are we revealing? And so, yeah, we're revealing the fear from the squealing and the jumping. And I think because of the tripping, we're revealing, the clumsy nature of her. So yeah, so I think that's doing some showing. Yeah.
Okay. Revealing is the word for this workshop. I think that revealing. I think if I'm working through the prompt later, I think what I'm going to want in my mind is to think about the word revealing. What does this reveal? And I think that. I think as storytellers, at least as beginner storytellers, I think that sometimes we get stuck in, well, this happens, and then this happens, and this happens, and action is happening. Mm-hmm. But I like what you said about revealing, because it goes back to what I said about how I felt about what I read in Paolini's book, where I felt like the choices he made were very intentional. Mm-hmm. That they were made to reveal something, they were made to show something, they were made to make the reader feel something. So instead of just, here's the story, here you go, we need to analyze all of the action we put in there, all of the words that we use, are they juicy words or not, and ask ourselves at any given point, is this scene revealing something about the plot or the character? Is this chapter revealing something about the plot or the character? And then in my mind, that's what I meant when I said your word count is moving, but your story isn't. Mm. If you're not constantly progressing the plot, progressing what the reader understands about the characters, things like that, then your story sort of stalls in the same place. So it needs to forever be progressing. So I think the word reveal is the great one here. Does anyone have any last minute questions for my wonderful co-host before we move on to the prompt? And while you're thinking about the prompt, I just want to let you know, I literally have story cubes for anybody who has not been on this before. And I want you to tell me a fun setting, a fun time, anything that you can come up with. So we usually do a problem, a setting, and a time. And then I roll the dice, and whatever comes up is what we write about. So it's kind of fun because you never know what it's going to be. So that being said, there is a little bit of a delay with the chat. I'm not seeing any questions. So I think that means you did a fantastic job.
Yes, we answered everything in a wonderful way.
Hide ourselves. Okay, so let's go on to our prompt and talk about setting and all that fun stuff. And just so that people know in the chat, I did see the fun conversation that was going on, and I did wish I was part of it, but I cannot be in more than one place at once. So I love you guys. You guys are awesome. And let's go ahead and anybody at home, feel free to add. And I'm going to put Wade on the spot and make him to add to this prompt as well. So what is a setting?
Let's go with an ice cream parlor.
Ooh, good.
An old-fashioned ice cream parlor.
Oh, look at you being specific. Specific. Old-fashioned ice cream parlor. I'm going to say a hotel because I can.
Okay.
And let's see. All right, my friends that are watching, what's a good setting? Wade, do you have anything else setting-wise?
I like the idea of an empty garage.
Cool. Empty garage. My marker is dying. Let's see. You are so specific, and I'm like, hotel. And my next one's gonna be car. Car. Under the overpass. I'm getting specific like you are. Okay. I've got enough for now. Ooh. An old house that is buried deep in snow. Ooh. Snowed in house is what I'm going to say.
Nice.
Awesome. My marker is dying. So we'll just roll this one dice. And then I don't even see another one, unfortunately. Sorry. And then we will just decide the rest of our prompt. Is that okay with you, Wade?
Okay.
Okay. So let me. Okay. It looks like we have old-fashioned ice cream parlor. And what is our time? It could be anything like yesterday, the apocalypse. Those are my two favorites. Could be anything. What's our time?
Let's go with the 1950s.
Ooh, look at you. Okay, so we have
Saturday afternoon, 1950s.
Okay, so we have old-fashioned ice cream parlor, and we have 1950s, and should we add a problem, or should we add, what should we add?
Oh, you know what I like adding? I like magic realism a lot. Not that we need to do magic realism, but I like adding, I like taking basically a mundane location or an everyday kind of location. And then I like adding something that's just weird, something that's kind of like magical or unreal. So I don't know if you want to leave it open so that they get to decide, you know, what they add, or if we want to give them what they add. Like maybe they could add the first mythical creature that comes to their mind. Yes. The first imaginary creature or supernatural creature or the first impossible creature that comes to their mind.
Okay. First impossible creature to come to your mind. Okay. Now, I'm going to add this to the chat. So as we work through this prompt, you guys, I hope that you guys will actually write with us, because this is my favorite part, actually, of it. So be thinking about what we talked about, show versus tell, where telling is just saying that things happened, and showing is revealing something about the character. So, and Wade, is it frequently done through action?
So think of it, yeah, it's often done through action. It's often done through, so like choices, right? Choices, decisions, reactions that the characters are making. So there are probably some exceptions to that. I think I stand here ironing. She's just ironing the whole time, which is an action, I suppose, and then everything else is an internal monologue. But most of the time, we're going to learn and have the character is going to be revealed by the choices he or she makes.
Okay.
Dialogue also helps and reveals a lot too. They say action speaks louder than words, and I think that's true most of the time, but dialogue is also important. But I also think I kind of equate dialogue with part of an action, right? It's a choice of what do you say? What do you say?
Your mouth is moving.
Words, we often think of like words not actions, but it's, for our purposes in fiction.
It's physically moving. It's physically moving. Okay. So I have showing revealed the character and happens through choices, decisions, reactions, and dialogue. And I'm going to add that to the chat so that I can have that visual reminder as I work through this. Okay, so can you give us quickly an example of what telling would be? And then we're going to go in and we're going to practice showing a mythical creature in the 1950s in the old-fashioned ice cream parlor.
Sure. So telling would be if you tell us that Sonny's ice cream parlor was owned by Sonny Jr. the Third, who was 2 days away from retiring. Right. So
Okay.
So we've been given information, which again, it's fine to have this combination of telling and showing. Right. So give us whatever information you think we need. But there's other ways to, instead of me telling you that he's 2 days away from retirement, there could be other things that I show you. So, and that's harder to come up with, off the fly, but it could be something about how, that he's sweeping up the floor, or, closing the sign and gives a sigh, right? So something like that, we know that, he's acting in a slow, emotional way about something he's probably done hundreds of times. Why? Right? So revealing something doesn't always happen all at once. And then as a writer, I might decide then it's like, okay, I've shown him feeling sad and nostalgic by his actions and his body language. What's going to happen next? And I get to decide, when do I want to reveal? When is the right time to reveal? Whether it's dialogue or something else. Maybe somebody, maybe he's about to close the sign and a leprechaun taps on the door. Yeah, that's my impossible figure. And he's like, "Oh, I just want to give you this present. It's a gold watch. You've been around so long, Sonny. So thank you for all that you've done for us leprechaun folk. We love your shamrock shakes." So again, there is some exposition in what my leprechaun character said, but giving the gift, maybe not saying that it's a gold watch yet, but giving like the little gift that's going to turn out to be this gold watch, which is a conventional symbol of retiring. Those kind of things are revealing what happens, rather than saying Sonny's going to retire in 2 days.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, I am setting my timer, and just 5 minutes sound good?
Okay.
Does that sound like not enough or too much?
No, that sounds good. That sounds good. I just realized I might not be able to come up with it. I'm the type of writer, it's like, what'd you do today? Well, I wrote 3 words,
Oh, you're very efficient like me. Okay. All right, so I've got 5 minutes on my clock, and I hope.
Now, let me say this before we start 5 minutes. Here's one of the things that I think about writing prompts that, like, anytime I do this is journal entry. Give yourself I know that we're trying to juggle all of these things, right? The old-fashioned ice cream store and the mythical thing, and then we're trying to show much more than tell. But give yourself permission to write crap. This is an experiment, and we know what we want to do. Maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. Don't worry about it. We're just writing for 5 minutes. So just have fun.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, I've got 5 minutes, and let's go. Those of you who are with us, please participate and write this writing prompt. If you're just tuning in, the writing prompt is in the chat. William, it is up to you how you interpret the prompt. So you go ahead and write it however it comes to you. All right, I hear it going, you guys. I'm just ignoring it for a second. Okay.
God darn it, I didn't get it. It's not enough time.
I know. I didn't get to my mythical creature. I
didn't either. That's okay. Well, I think, depending on how you do the prompt, like I wanted to start with the mundane world and a mundane character, and then get to the mythical creature. But some people might just be starting with the mythical creature. There is probably more.
Yeah, I thought about that, but with the story that I wanted to show, with the story that I wanted to show, I didn't want to start with the creature because I wanted to be able to have her sort of summon the creature. And so, so now typically what we do is we share, and I don't know who is still currently live with us. If you are live and you wrote it and you feel like sharing and asking for feedback, we are here for that. If you want to keep it to yourself, it's up to you. Wait, do you feel like sharing what you wrote, or would you like just me to?
I'm just disappointed. I liked what I was verbalizing with the leprechaun character more than what I was getting. And I know, and the funny thing is, like, there's some details that right when your musical timer going off, I was in the middle of doing what I think of more as telling kind of details than showing. But I tried to show at the beginning, so I'll read what I have. It's not great. Sonny Jr. Sonny Jr. pushed the broom across the black and white checkered floor, the broom and the man moving like old dance partners when the band plays the last slow song of the evening. The sweeping sound echoed the walls of the ice cream parlor as it always did after the little ones had gone home, or something like that. I'm not like, but it would always did like after the little ones had gone home, having had their fill of banana splits, egg creams, and chocolate sundaes. And that's as far as I got. So that second part, like the little ones and the list of the ice cream, is much more sort of, it's detail oriented, I suppose, right? Because we get like a list of the old fashioned ice cream things, but it's kind of like telling because it's not part of the scene, something that already happened. But I wanted to put the little ones. I wanted to phrase the little ones there because I didn't want to write a leprechaun character showing up. So I want a little bit of foreshadowing. The little ones are, in fact, little people, and he is a purveyor of ice cream to leprechauns and brownies and pixies and stuff like that.
Okay.
But I spent a little too much time on that first sentence, going like, I want to make the broom really important. So I wanted to have like kind of like a little bit of nostalgia and romance for this guy and his broom. Yes,
I love it. Okay. So the thing that I think is funny is that you and I chose the same name. I went with Sunny as well. And it's a male Sunny, which is interesting because my female cousin's name is Sunny. So I don't know why I went male on that one, but I did. Sorry, Sunny. So here is what I have, and feel free to pick mine apart just like you did yours and tell me what parts are more telling and what parts are more showing. I feel like that is the best way to learn. I don't mind being the guinea pig. So let's go to it. Okay, I'm slurping my last bit of ice cream when the door clangs behind Sunny with a finality that settles in my gut. I clench the glass in front of me, ignoring Susie's warning glances. My smile freezes on my face, my stomach churning from too much ice cream. Sunny struts to the counter, his swagger increasing my nausea. I didn't get to finish that sentence. But she's wishing she had not enjoyed that ice cream so readily. So.
And do you know why?
Do I know? I know that Sunny is a bully. And I know that the main character, who I don't have a name for, has the ability to call these creatures. And her friend is like, don't you do it, because her friend knows.
Oh. Gotcha. Yeah, so I think what I was jotting down when I was listening, so slurp, clang, clinch, warning, churning. Most of those are verbs. The warning, is it a warning glance? Is that what you said? So we get a participle, kind of an adjective. but a verb-oriented adjective. So all of those things are starting to give connotation as to, what's going on. And so like when you got to the stomach churning and then the nausea, it's like, oh wow, what's like? Yeah. Is this somebody that they hate? Is it somebody that they're nervous about? So we don't know. That's why I was asking, like, oh, do you know what's going to happen? Because it's obviously it's turning up the tension. Whereas if we said, Sonny walked in, I hate that guy, he's a bully, that would be an example of just telling.
Okay.
And so showing, revealing is like, oh, this person walks in and I'm clenching the glass. I don't feel good, right? Like tension's building the closer this person gets in. So we don't know yet, like, what's the reason, because we're not finished with the story. But we do know, hey, something's happening. This person's having a reaction.
Yes. Okay. So those are examples of showing. Now, is there any point in which I slipped into telling? Let me see.
Well, read it again.
Smile freezes on my face. Is that showing?
Read the whole thing again.
The whole thing. Okay. I'm slurping my last. I wrote pit. My bad. My last bit of ice cream when the door clangs behind Sonny with a finality that settles in my gut. I clench the glass cup in front of me, ignoring Susie's warning glances. My smile freezes on my face. My stomach churning from too much ice cream. Sonny struts to the counter, his swagger increasing my nausea.
Yeah, so I think that it's mostly showing what, at least how I've defined showing and telling. The words that you say when you say, like, with a finality and swagger. Swagger's like kind of a good verb, but there's to me because there's a lot of different ways of interpreting swagger, and there's different ways of interpreting, like, with a finality, right? It closes with a finality. So, and again, I don't know if this necessarily, those are examples of telling, but if one of the ingredients of telling, the way we're describing it, is being kind of vague, then some of those aspects that I just mentioned, finality and swagger, those were left kind of vague. So those are, but again, I want to emphasize that that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Because that could be something that I wrap up later that plays into something later.
Yeah. So what's interesting about swagger is that it has very different connotations, and so it could be like very boastful, very obnoxious, but it could also be very kind of playful. And I don't suggest, right, to make. Here's the thing: is that even though I'm wondering, what kind of swagger it is, if it's an adverb or an adjective, you say, like, he walks in with a playful swagger, I think that's even more telling and less showing. Right. Okay. So if he walks in with a swagger while he's, flipping a yo-yo around, right? So then it's like, okay, well, it could still be dangerous, but I know that that's kind of playful, because he has a freaking yo-yo. So those are the things, like, if you find little spots where you feel like, oh, well, this is kind of vague, maybe it's okay. Or maybe there's more ingredients you could have or maybe you just could take it out.
Okay, so what I was intending with those two words specifically is to set up his character and the relationship. So the swagger was eventually going to be the obnoxious bully kind of swagger, and it was going to play out later in the scene, like with how he interacts with them and stuff like that. Both of those things were kind of, and I think the finality was going to be more of like the feeling like, crap, like now he's here and there's nothing I can do about it. I can't pretend like I'm not, put the menu up. I can't hide. I can't run away. He's here. He saw me. Oh crap, I'm screwed. That kind of a thing. So I had intended to then work it into the scene later. So if that's the case, then it would be okay, versus if it was just.
Oh, I think so. And like I said, I mean, if it's really, because we're talking about balancing, right? We want. I don't know if I mentioned this video. Not that I want people to steer away from either one of our channels, right? They should only stay on our channels. But
only ever.
Are you familiar with Diane Callahan and her videos?
I have seen one, yes.
I like them, and so I'm going to recommend Diane Callahan has a video on about show versus tell. And so that's, now I can't remember the point I was going to, because I was looking to see if I could find out what she was saying. But she talks a lot about how oh, I remember. She talks a lot about the balancing act of telling and showing, that they can work nicely together. Yeah. Especially if we say something like, for example, going back to your sunny bully kind of character, if we say that he swaggers in, we're told a little piece, right? Where we get the idea of swagger. We don't know exactly what kind of swagger, but the first thing that he says, which is probably going to be obnoxious, that's going to show us. Yes. And then, so if those two things are happening pretty close to each other, then it can work really well. And the example that Diane Callahan uses on her video is she talks about the opening of The Secret Garden. And in that book, Mary Lennox is immediately described in the first couple sentences as very like sour, cross young lady. And so it's just telling us, here she's sour. Everybody thinks that she looks disagreeable and acts disagreeable. And so that's told to us before we even get a chance to experience her. But then the following paragraph starts to describe what she does and what she looks like. And so that becomes more of the revealing aspect that we're talking about of showing. So I think it's often, a nice kind of combination when we sort of summarize what needs to be summarized, but always make sure that we're showing, at least if we're talking about most fiction. Again, there's lots of exceptions, but in most fiction and screenplays, we want to have more showing than telling. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I remember what I wanted to quote from her. I'm glad. Yeah, I'm glad I brought up the Mary Lennox thing, because I love The Secret Garden. I thought I wrote it down, but she says that we shouldn't be using the phrase "show, don't tell." We should be. She said, yeah. So you can have mitigation. We should be using the phrase "show, don't just tell."
I've always been doing balancing show versus tell, or balancing showing and telling.
Yeah. So the emphasis that she's placing is on show, but in her video she gives a lot of great examples of, here's where telling can be effective. So show, don't just tell, I think is nice advice.
I love that. Yes, and that was kind of the point of my video.
And I'm gonna use my words. I would say reveal more than summarize.
Okay.
Or experience more than summarize.
Yes, I love that. Okay, and William said swagger could also be arrogance, and yes, William, that is exactly what I was going for, is his arrogance in that. And then William also added his prompt. So if you don't mind, I'd love to run through that with you.
Yeah. Let's do it.
A breath caught in Esther's throat as she entered Albert's ice cream parlor for the first time in 6 years. So many memories came flooding back. It was here she got her first kiss. It was here she danced with Tony for the first time. She glanced towards the back corner where he had proposed to her all those years ago.
All right. You want me to go first, or you want to go first?
Yes, go for it.
Okay, so there's actually there's a lot of telling in there. And then there's a mix of what I think of as showing. Read it one more time and I'll stop you where the first part of telling is. Okay.
So many memories came flooding back. It was here she got her first kiss, and it was here.
Was that the beginning?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, it wasn't. My bad. A breath caught in Esther's throat as she entered Albert's ice cream parlor for the first time in 6 years.
Okay, so just looking at that sentence, right? So a breath caught, what's the character's name?
Esther.
Yes. Esther's throat, right? So that is what I consider showing, because we are getting like this action, right, that we interpret as, it's like, okay, somebody's they're stunned, they're gasping, or they're having this emotional experience. So that's getting to the realm of showing. It's not, we don't know everything yet, so we're not having a vicarious experience yet, but we're getting something revealed. And then when we are told that she hasn't been here for 6 years, right? This is the first time she's been here for 6 years. That would be what I would consider telling. Because the narrator is giving us this information.
Yeah.
Right? So this third person narrator is like delivering like, oh, hey, why is she gasping? I'm going to tell you she's gasping because she hasn't been here for 6 years. And there's a lot of memories, and we're going to see all those memories. Now, all the little memories, right, the little specific memories, those to me are more about showing, because I can conjure up sort of mental images that have this emotional context in there. So we're revealing that. So the tricky part of this, and by the way, I liked listening to it, and so I'm not saying like, well, there was more telling in there than showing, and I didn't like. Because we're telling the reader mostly. It's like, here's her past with this place. Here's her past with this place. If we sort of if we, and again, we're kind of talking about the fiction mode. So let's imagine now that William is going to revise this into a little play, a scene that's going to take place on stage or in a film in which we're only relying on character dialogue. In that case, and we don't get to have the benefit of a narrator saying like, wow, I remember walking, right? It's not Ferris Bueller. There's no Dickensian narrator that's going to come in and walk us through. So if we are just writing dialogue, that all of that information that we saw might come about in a way that's more like showing or more like revealing. So if is it her name Esther again? Is that the character? So if Esther walks in and catches her breath, looking it around, and then says, it looks exactly the same.
Oh, interesting. Right?
So if she says that, now we don't know how many years it's been, but we know she hasn't been here for a while.
Yeah.
Right? I've shown the audience that a little bit. And if the guy that's wiping the counter says, Esther, when's the last time you've been in here? It's been like, again, the character, the trouble that can happen with plays is the same thing that can happen in fiction. Sonny, the soda jerk, could say, Esther, I haven't seen you in 6 years. Yes, I remember. And you went on a date there, and you went on a date there, right? And so that's still much exposition. But so it's kind of about finding. Showing is going to be about finding the places to make the reader or the audience do some work. So when she shows up and says it looks exactly the same, she has not told us, oh, I haven't been here in a long time, but we've done a little 2 + 2 = 4 work to figure out, oh, this has been a while for her. Now that said, depending on what kind of story we're writing, and all 3 of us that have shared, we all wanted to get to the mythical creature that we never. So sometimes telling is very useful, because if we need to establish, look, I just need to quickly establish. I don't need a long 5-minute scene of her, talking to the guy and slowly dripping in her past. I want the audience to know, I want my reader to know she hasn't been here for 6 years. She has strong positive memories for this place. And then some event's going to happen. And then that's when I'm really going to get into the story. So telling can be useful when it's like, I just want to get here. I just want to get to this place. And I don't want to have, a long drawn up. So there's something to be said about telling just a little bit, at the very beginning of certain stories, not all, but certain stories.
That's interesting, because I had a friend that told me that they absolutely never tell in their stories. And I'm kind of with you on this. I would tell transitions, or I would tell quick little bits of information that I feel like the reader needs to know. And I wouldn't edit that out. I wouldn't feel bad about that. I would feel like, yes, this is what I intended. But they said what they do instead is they just jump cut to that spot where the action's happening. So I thought that was
And
really
of course, we're using cinematic terms again, right? When we say jump cut, right?
Yeah.
And so when we're talking about, and it's, so when we're talking about the land of literature, that might be very different territory. There might be other reasons to use that, and it might not be out of laziness. To go back to Stephen King, who shows much more than he tells, will sometimes intentionally tell. He does this in at least half of his novels. And I love it every time. I'm a sucker for it every time. And this is what he does. He'll have a character, like I think in the Tommyknockers, character is an English teacher, and he suffers with alcoholism and stuff like that. And he's reading this poem to adoring fans who are clapping and applauding and just loving his work. And then he's done with the poetry reading, shakes people's hands. I think he's drunk while he's doing this. He shakes his hands and he goes to leave to go visit a friend. And Stephen King tells us that was the last poetry reading he ever had. And he tells us that at the beginning of the book. And so he lets us know this information to let us know that something foreboding is going to happen. Yeah. Is he going to live? Is he going to die? We don't know. But what we do know is he's never going to read a poem again. And why does Stephen King deliver that information? Because it creates a sense of doom, right? A sense of tension. In a way that, showing creates tension in a lot of other magnificent ways. But sometimes telling us is kind of a slap in the face. Narrator, were you supposed to tell me that? I can't believe you told me that.
That's really interesting. I know the Greeks. The Greeks did their plays that way because they felt like their plays should be instructional, and if they give you the ending at the beginning, then you could watch it happen and learn instead of being surprised by it. So lot of
and what's interesting about that example that I gave, and Stephen King will do this, he gives away only a component of the ending, right? He doesn't tell you the whole fate of the character, but he does tell you an ingredient, right? He tells you a component. It's I'm not going to tell you what happens to this character, but I'm going to tell you he never reads a poem in public again.
It's very interesting. Yeah. William said that Carrie is also an example of that. He's talking about her mom being a Christian fanatic. I don't recall that part of Carrie, but I tried to burn that burning show from my mind. Okay. So William, the interesting thing is that Wade and I both stopped at the same place and felt like it was showing, but we both went about it differently. So I want to tell you what I would have written, just so you have two very different examples, and just for the sake of the discussion, to go back to, there are multiple ways that we can show. So I would have had her touching something. That's how I would have revealed her nostalgia, is through the worn wood, or where they carved their initials, or something that is nostalgic that she can just touch. So if we're looking at love languages, my love language is quality time and touch. And I know a lot of men are touch, but I am touch. I like the sense of touch. I like to hold hands. I like to give hugs. I like to brush my fingers through people's hair. This is how I show love. So for me, I would think nostalgia in terms of, is she feeling the worn wood? Is she feeling the letters carved? And then as she touches the letters of their initials carved in the table, I would have the memories play in front of her mind. So they would be whizzing sort of across her mind. For those of you who can see it, sort of like this, but one at a time, whizzing in front of her mind, and then and just say a first touch, a first kiss, a first love never forgotten, or something like that, to then show that positive relationship between them. So that's how I would have handled it. It was very different from dialogue. So that's really cool that he and I both went very different directions with that.
Yeah. I like that your take on that, because touch is very, any of the images, right? Any of the senses are great to include.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So this was super fun. I think we've got another comment right down here. I didn't think of that. Thank you. You're welcome. Mwah. Love you. And thank you for those of you who hung out with us. This was super fun. Wade, I will have you back anytime you want to be back.
Thank you.
You tell me you want to come back, and we will make it a topic because I love having you on my channel.
Well, thanks very much.
Yeah, of course. And this video will be left up so anybody that missed it can catch it, and the prompt is literally in the chat. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found value. Let me know what your questions still are or what your confusions still are in the comments below after the fact, and I will do my best to either answer it myself if I know, or go to people who do know when I don't, like Wade here, who's wonderful to join us, and answer your questions. So I love you all, and welcome to my channel, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.